Okay, let's get right into it. When we hear about tariffs in China, the conversation always seems to land on one thing: prices. Will my next phone cost more, or is this going to raise the price of a new car? And look, that's an important question, for sure, but it completely misses a much, much bigger story. There's a strategic vulnerability that has Pentagon planners working around the clock. So today, we're going to peel back that economic debate to show you the hidden infrastructure problem that could actually define the next major global crisis.
Just think about the car you drive. We might think of it as American or German or Japanese, but the truth is it's got over 200 parts inside that were made in China. Your phone? Dozens of parts. That gaming console you have? It's almost entirely dependent on Chinese supply chains. These are just the everyday examples of this deeply interconnected system we built. But what happens when that system gets put under some real stress?
And that right there, that is the exact question military strategists have been running simulations on. And they're not just worried about empty store shelves. They're asking, what happens to our national security when the flow of these essential goods is cut off, maybe even intentionally? And the answers they've been finding have been quietly reshaping American industrial and defense policy for a little while now. So yeah, while the public is focused on the price of a new TV, we're being distracted from what's really going on. That whole debate about tariffs is just a symptom, It's a surface-level argument that hides a much deeper problem, a hidden fragility in the very system that powers our economy and our military.
This slide really gets to the heart of it. It shows the difference between how we think global trade works and how it actually does. We have this simple idea in our heads, right? A factory in China makes a thing, it gets put on a boat, and it shows up in a US store. Easy. But the reality? Well, it's a sprawling, incredibly fragile network. You've got raw materials from one continent being processed on another, assembled somewhere else, and then shipped through a dozen different choke points. And any one of those points could fail and bring the whole thing crashing down.
And here it is. This is the absolute crucial point. This isn't just about getting your Amazon packages. The very same ships, the same ports, the same rail lines that bring you all your everyday stuff, they're also what we use to deploy military equipment, ammunition, and supplies in a crisis. Our commercial and our military supply chains are basically one and the same. They share the exact same weaknesses.
And if you want a little preview of what that weakness looks like, you just have to think back to 2021. Those massive shipping backups we saw during the pandemic? That was a stress test. That was a warning sign in peacetime of what could happen during a full-blown conflict, and it showed us 3 critical problems that an adversary could totally exploit.
Okay, first up, our ports are already running near their absolute maximum limit. The US has only 11 major container ports, and on a normal day, they're running at 85 to 90% capacity. Those 2021 backups, that's what happens when they hit 100%. Just total gridlock. Now, war games have shown that just rerouting supply chains away from a conflict zone could add up to 30% more volume to our ports that have no spare capacity at all. They would just jam solid.
And this leads to this terrifying new strategic idea. It's called logistics vulnerability exploitation. An adversary doesn't even have to attack our military directly. They could just trigger a crisis somewhere that forces global shipping to reroute, which then swamps our ports with civilian cargo and completely paralyzes our military's ability to deploy. They could use our own infrastructure against us.
But here's the thing, port congestion is just one piece of this puzzle. When you combine it with 2 other critical dependencies, it creates what planners are calling a perfect logistical storm. A scenario where multiple interconnected failures could all happen at the exact same time.
So let's break the storm down. It has 3 parts. First, you've got the port overload we just talked about. Second, there's a resource trap that involves rare earth elements. And finally, there's the semiconductor time bomb. And that's all centered on Taiwan. Each one of these is a crisis on its own. But together, a strategic nightmare. So let's look at that resource trap. This chart just lays it out perfectly. China doesn't just mine most of the world's rare earth elements, it controls 90% of the processing. And these things aren't just for smartphones. They are absolutely essential for modern military hardware. We're talking everything from missile guidance systems to jet engines. And to put that into perspective, a single F-35 fighter jet needs 920 pounds of these materials. A Virginia-class submarine, over 9,000 pounds. So in a conflict, the US would need to ramp up defense production at the very same moment its main adversary controls the key ingredients. It's a complete strategic catch-22.
And then there's the semiconductor time bomb. We all know Taiwan is critical, but this chart shows you just how critical. Taiwan manufactures 90% of the world's most advanced chips.
These are the brains behind every single piece of modern technology, both for civilians and the military. Any disruption here would be, and I mean this literally, catastrophic.
Now, here's the dangerous paradox in all this. All these US efforts to become self-sufficient in making chips, like the CHIPS Act, they're seen by China as a closing window of opportunity. The thinking over there is that they might have to act before the US builds a resilient, independent supply chain, while Taiwan's silicon shield is still this incredibly powerful point of leverage over the entire global economy. This whole situation is actually accelerating the timeline for a potential crisis.
So faced with this perfect storm of vulnerabilities, what is the US actually doing about it? Well, behind the headlines, the Pentagon and the Commerce Department have started this quiet but massive industrial overhaul. It's a strategic response that most Americans have never even heard about. The first thing you have to understand is that the goal isn't total independence. That's just not going to happen. The idea that the US is going to make everything itself is economically impossible. The real strategy is something called allied interdependence. And that's all about building a secure, redundant supply chain system with trusted partners like Japan, Australia, South Korea, and nations in Europe.
And right here, you can see the specific actions being taken for each problem. To fix the port vulnerability, billions of dollars are being invested in modernization, creating what are basically HOV lanes for critical military cargo to bypass any jams. To break that rare earth trap, the government is using the Defense Production Act to fund our own mining and to secure new sources from allies like Australia. And to defuse the semiconductor time bomb, the CHIPS Act isn't just about making more chips, it actually requires these new factories to prioritize military needs during a crisis.
But here's the catch. None of these fixes happen overnight. They take years to implement. And that creates this critical period of heightened risk, a window of maximum vulnerability that strategists are now calling the 2027 danger zone.
This timeline really makes the urgency clear. Right now, our vulnerabilities are high, but by 2027 and definitely by 2028, as new port capacity, domestic chip factories, and allied resource chains all start coming online, the US position gets much, much stronger. And that means the period between now and then is the most dangerous, because an adversary might feel pressure to act before that window closes for good. So, what's the big takeaway from all this for you? Well, for starters, this whole strategic overhaul is expensive. The era of super cheap, hyper-efficient, but really fragile supply chains, that's over. Prices on some things will probably stay higher as we pay for security and resilience. This isn't some temporary disruption. This is the new normal.
So the next time you hear a debate about tariffs, just remember what's really at stake. The fight isn't about the price of a t-shirt. It's about a quiet, high-stakes race to rebuild the logistical foundations of national power before it's too late. It's not about trade. It's about the very infrastructure that enables a nation to defend itself.